Welcome to the 19th ESC Every Soldier Counts podcast.
Wherever you find American troops today, you find the men of the Transportation Corps. Enough and on time. That's the story we tell you today. The story of the Army Quartermaster Corps.
These youthful servicemen are members of the Army's Military Police Corps.
One of the most important forces behind the lines, the Army Ordnance Corps.
Welcome to the 19th ESC Every Soldier Counts podcast. Every Soldier Counts is in our name. I'm Captain Debraj Mukherjee, otherwise known as Raj, and I'm really excited to speak with my guest today. In 1996, she joined the Army with one goal in mind: provide a stable home for her family. 26 years, 3 deployments, and a whole candy dish of awards later, she is our G3 Sergeant Major Aceves. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Awesome. So and you have quite a story to tell. Before we get into that, would you mind telling us a little bit about what a G3 does? And you can't say everything.
Okay, no, fine. I'm the G3 Operations Sergeant Major. We are the brains of the organization.
So so last week we actually did our podcast with Colonel Nieto, and at the end she's like, "You have to make sure that you talk with Sergeant Major Aceves. She's got a legit story to tell," and she's the real deal. So I'm excited to hear it. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where you grew up.
I grew up in between California and Mexico.
Okay.
In my childhood years, I did maybe 5 or 6 years of schooling altogether.
Oh, wow.
But I graduated high school, okay? So I always write down 12 years.
Yeah.
Okay, for when I'm growing up. I was growing up.
You were born in Berkeley, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then it sounds like your family kind of moved around a lot.
Yes, we did. We moved around a lot. Every time we couldn't afford to live in the States, we would move back to Mexico. So when we were living in the States, it wasn't always a house or a halfway home, or like it was more of a garage, where the garage door was our main entrance / our window / right.
Yeah.
And then we had a bed in the middle of the garage, and there was junk on the side, so it wasn't like a garage that they turned into a room. It was an actual somebody's garage where they still had their junk in there on the sides. And we peed in a bucket, and if we wanted to go number 2, my mom was like, "You better save it for school," So that's just how it went.
So this was all in Berkeley, California, or
different places. It was just Berkeley, LA, Oakland.
Where did
just different places of California.
So what did your family do to make ends meet?
Now, my dad he used to make small pieces for airplanes. He used to build that. That's what he used to do. And my mom used to just stay home with us. She used to, so when my dad would go to work, my mom would just stay home with us. Or sometimes, like when we were living in the hotel, it was a 1-star hotel. I could talk about it now because they tore it down.
Oh, right.
It was a 1-star hotel.
You're not putting any
in
shade
LA, right?
Yeah.
But the deal was, if we cleaned all the rooms in that hotel, all the rooms, then we could stay.
Okay.
Without having to pay. So I would just so sometimes, even when I was living in the States, in California, I wasn't in school because I was helping my mom to clean these hotels, make the beds, and and that my mom knew the frequent stayers and the passive stayers. The frequent stayers, she would know the isms. She would be like, "Okay, this one wants ice on the sink. This one wants," so
wow.
It was just, yes. And then they would leave change on the counter. That was just always so great to find, by the way, like it would just make my mom's day.
Be like the small things.
Change, like all this pocket change and balloons, because they knew that I was helping my mom. So she would be like, "Look what they left us," like once they would check out.
Wow. So it sounds like it was you, your mom, your dad, and how many did you have any siblings?
My sister.
Okay.
And my brother. My brother has autism.
Wow. So
really bad autism.
Your brother is the youngest of your siblings?
Yes.
Okay. So it's you, your mom, your dad, your sister, and your brother with autism.
Yes.
You guys started in Berkeley?
We started, I don't know where they started.
It sounds like you did so much moving around. I can
We
imagine why
did,
it'd be so hard to keep track of all that.
Yes, like we lived in, I mean, I remember San Francisco. It's just
Okay.
bits and pieces of, and the road. I remember the road a lot because when we were living in the car, at times I would just tell my family, because we were just on the road for days, taking bird baths and the
What kind
gas
of car did you guys
stations.
have, out of curiosity?
It was like a station wagon, like a Volkswagen,
Oh,
like
wow.
with a large bed on the back, and we would just lay there. And my parents would tell us, "Hey, stay down, keep down," So that's what we would do,
And when we were talking before the interview, it sounded like so your life in general sounds like it was incredibly difficult, but when things got so difficult, you couldn't stay in the U.S. Your family would go to your...
Yes, we would just move. We would just drive for days, and I didn't know that we were going to Mexico. They wouldn't communicate with us.
Right.
We would just know that we were on the road for days, and I would be like, "Are we going back to the hotel? Like we're on the road for days. We haven't stopped at a
Wow.
local store to like sleep or anything, And then we were in Mexico. Next thing I knew, and I was like, "Oh, we're back here."
So where would your family stay in Mexico?
In La Estancia Nayarit, like the outskirts of Guadalajara, Mexico.
Okay.
So in Guadalajara, with in my grandma's house,
Okay.
rest in peace, or in La Estancia, and we would go to La Estancia a lot, and that's the ranch. That's where you're peeing. So I went from peeing in buckets in LA, to peeing in a hole on the ground,
wow.
like with the flies and
Oh,
it
geez.
was
So
just-
you were using field sanitation in open trenches before you ever go in the army, right?
But like field sanitation, what's that? I mean, I didn't know that growing up. We were just like, okay, whatever.
So the La Estancia, whose ranch was this?
No, this was just El Pueblo.
Oh,
That's
okay,
what it was
gotcha.
called,
And so whose ranch did you guys stay on?
It was a Pueblo, and my aunt and uncle.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, so
My
was it...
grandma had another house there,
Gotcha.
and then in El Pueblo, not everybody has it's not like everybody has cows and hens or whatever. Like my grandma's house, she had all the trees with the mangos, tamarindos, she had the trees to where, other people had cows, other people have, so that's just how they make the living, like not everybody has hens and roosters, other people have that. So for us, like if we wanted milk, I would have to get up at 5 a.m, and my mom would send me to three different locations that actually had cows, and that's how we would get our milk for the morning.
You would literally at 5 a.m. take a bucket
Yes.
and milk the cow?
Yes. Have you had milk from the cow before?
I have not.
It is not like in the store. In the store, I don't know what they do with it, but it's absolutely delicious. Not from the cow.
Wow. So
Not from the cow.
So raw milk from the
doesn't
cow is
not
not
even,
a-
and you have to boil it. It's not like you could just drink it like that.
Yeah.
I don't know why they show it like that in the movies, because that's not true. You don't just drink it like that.
yeah.
You have to
I
boil it
imagine.
to kill the bacteria, because it was sitting in the cow's stomach, right?
Yeah.
And I remember carrying the bucket, and I already know I don't like it, so I'm carrying it and I'm holding it, and I feel the warm bucket, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to drink this. Like
wow.
the Nestle Quick, nothing, Pancho Pantera, that's our Nestle Quick, right?
Yeah.
Nothing can disguise
The taste
the
of...
taste of the milk. But my mom was like, but you need it, you're growing up.
Oh, wow. So that's how you guys got your nutrition, was
Yes.
you went and got it straight from the cow. And that's a great tip. If I ever see a cow, I'll never just milk it and drink right
You
from
have
the
to
other.
kill the bacteria.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank God for homogenation. Am I right? So I mean, that's intense. So you and your family are moving between the U.S., and then when things got too hard in the U.S., you're going to your aunt and uncle's ranch in Mexico. And it sounds like this went on till high school. But so when did you have the idea? When did you have it in mind that you wanted to join the Army, or what inspired you to join the Army?
I remember this. This was like in the middle of 5th grade, right? In the middle of 5th grade, they had like a career day, right? And they had all these different stations in the gym, and everybody had their swag. It was open for everybody to just check it out. And And I remember the poster, the Be All You Can Be poster. It just drew me in because I was like, all I can be, like, me? Like, are they talking to me? This is for me too?
Wow.
Like, I
The
felt
message
like they were
resonated.
also reaching out to me. Like, even somebody like me can be all that I could be, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what drew me to that station. And they had all these different stuff, pens and whatever. And I asked them, I was like, so what is it that I can? And they were like, anything. You can join and enlist and do whatever you want. And I was like, really? And I can make a lot of money? And they just kind of chuckled to each other. And they were like, yes, absolutely. You can make a lot of money. And I was like, so this means that I can buy a house for my family and we don't have to move back to Mexico ever again. And they chuckled to each other again, and they were like, sure. But that made my day.
They didn't realize how intense and serious you were probably being. They're seeing a fifth grader. They don't know like where you're coming from or what you've been doing just to make ends meet, or that what raw milk out of a cow's udder tastes like.
They had no idea. I'm living in a garage and I'm living in my dad's car. I was like, wow. I walked out of there with hope. It was like they planted a seed in me. I was like, wow, this is great. So because we moved, not even a month later, like we moved back to Mexico from that.
Wow.
So I didn't finish fifth grade, but from there, I was like, it just didn't matter. I felt so alive because I was like, I can get us out of this one day. One day we won't ever have to move back to Mexico. We don't have to pee in buckets. We don't have to hold the number 2 until we go to school. We don't have to do any of that. I was like, we'll have our own home.
Things a normal grade schooler probably would never could even imagine worrying about. Your instead of worrying about math and English homework, you're worrying about like where you're going to shower. So it sounds like, so in the fifth grade, the seed is planted, and it kind of like we were discussing, it changed the context of what you were doing. So when you were prior to this, seeing the stand and meeting these people, when you're moving and you're living in the garage and you're on the road for a long time, was it like, did it feel hopeless or?
No, I mean, that was just a way of life. I didn't sit there and feel the thing is that I didn't want is like when people would notice us in the gas stations, for instance, when we were doing the birth baths, and I seen people noticing what we were doing. I just didn't want them to feel sorry for us. That's all. I was like, we're just passing. We're just trying to clean, Yeah. But I can see it, the look in their face. Like some of them were like, oh my gosh, like this is their bath, But they had that look in their face. But and I didn't want them to feel bad for us, I was just like, just look away.
Well, leave us alone, leave us to our business. But then, so after the fifth grade, after you had this meeting, this meeting at the Army, at this Army recruitment stand, you saw that you could be all you could be. How did you feel about, and then you said literally 2 weeks after you're moving back to Mexico. And so it sounded like you saw light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, because I was like, I can make money. Because I was so worried about growing up and not being able to. I did worry about not being able to finish an education. I was really worried about like people finding out that I was skipping a lot of school, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're in 11th grade, but you skipped first, second, and part of fifth." And, I was worried that they were going to be like, yeah, you're in 11th grade, but you have to finish second grade and third grade. I was so worried. Yes, those were my worries when I was young. I was like, they're going to make me sit through this class, all these classes, right? And so back then I was worried that, like, if I don't get an education, I don't finish school, I'm not going to be able to get go to college and get a good job and be able to make money I was worried about that. But when the recruiters were like, yeah, or whoever that was running the Be All You Can Be, the Army,
finally,
right?
Yeah.
Whenever they said, yeah, that this could be you too, you can make money, you can join and do all of this, that was like, that made my day. I was like, I can do this. Education or no education, I could do this.
Yeah, excellent. You saw that, despite everything you were coming from, you could be all you could be, and whatever your background was, your life had near limitless potential. So how long after high school did you end up joining the Army?
No, just right out of high school.
Oh, wow.
Yes, my mom wouldn't let me. I wanted to join at 17 because with your parents' permission, you can join at 17.
Yeah.
But my mom was like, absolutely not. What are you doing, right?
So sounds like your parents weren't super stoked about you joining the Army initially.
No, my dad was, back then he was working in Alaska. Like he was working on the boats.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't there. And my mom was the one that was, she was home and we were. And
was he crab? He was a crab fisherman? He was doing crab fishing up in Alaska?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
wow.
He worked in a
That's
Northern
dangerous.
Jagger. He worked
Yeah.
he did a lot of, yes. He was part of that Exxon spill, that affected us
Right.
also.
Yeah.
We were living in Mexico. That was such bad times too, like we're in Mexico trying to get out of Mexico and get into the States, and then the Exxon spills happen, and then we're like, oh no,
Just like-
Dad's not making money.
Just when you think, well, at least it can't get worse, then
Yeah, it
you
was like,
get-
so
you
what
go
does
to
that
the
mean
oil spill.
for us? We can't get out of Mexico now. Like we have to wait. Like that's what that meant for us
Right.
back then. But yeah, it was. So I had to wait until I was 18 to sign the paperwork, and as soon as I graduated, I was
You were out.
gone. I
You were
was
ready.
gone. I was like, I am ready. Of course, I couldn't buy a house right away like
Yeah.
I wanted to, of course. But I always had that in mind.
It was
I was like, I'm gonna get this
you had
done.
to go. Yeah, you had to go. You had the goal, and it was set. So what MLS did you enlist as?
I'm a generator mechanic.
Oh wow, okay. And
Yes, and it was just that was what was available. I was anything else in the medical field or whatever.
Yeah.
They were like, well, yeah, you can wait until like November or whenever these other. And I was like, no, what's available now? And they were like, well, you could be a power generation equipment repairer. And I was like, what's that? And they were like, it's a technical job. You're
right.
yeah.
Recruiter
They were
jargon.
like, you can get it. It's fine. You can. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right.
Send
Send me,
it.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. So how long after you joined? How long after you joined were you able to buy that house for your family?
No, it wasn't until I was a staff sergeant.
Okay.
So it was still a few years until
Okay.
I was able to get there, right? But I got there.
Yeah, and so it sounds like it's somebody who's, I mean, I can think of a very small number of people who've probably dealt with things like you've dealt with as a child. So somebody who's dealt with a lot of hardships and hasn't had that structure or support system when you're a kid and had to literally worry about, like where am I going to go to the bathroom today, and are they going to let me graduate because I missed the entire years of school? How do you think that translated to your ability to be an NCO, or your once you became an E5 and an NCO, like all those experiences? How do you think that contributed to your style of leadership?
It was just being able to help others overcome their challenges and being able to groom them to aspire for more. I didn't want them to just settle for what they had. I wanted them to always strive to make their dreams come true, right? To strive for more.
Do you ever get a soldier or a junior leader who's like, oh well, I didn't get this or I get that, and then you just drop the whole like, well, I used to live in a car.
No. This is something that I always shared with everybody. It was just I've kept that to myself for for a very long time. You know, I just didn't really want to use my example for. I know that before I've shared my experience. Like I can count in one hand how many times I've shared this particular experience, and I've been in the Army for 26 years. So it's not like any time somebody's having a struggle, I'm like, well, I used to live in a car. I used to have to wait to go number 2 to go to the, to school. And it wasn't even about that.
Right.
I didn't even, my focus was what they were going through and making sure that they understood that I cared for what they were going through and I wanted to help them overcome it. That was my focus, not so much in like trying to match them. Like,
I
so
think that does. No, and I love that, because I think nowadays we get so caught up in comparing struggles, comparing hardships, that I think when you're a leader, and even if something that your subordinate or your subordinate leader is going through may sound trivial to you, it's not to them. That they didn't have the hardships, and I think the fact that you were able to separate those things and have empathy for your subordinates, I think that shows how much empathy you've developed through your experiences.
Yes, and it's not because I was, and again, it's not because I was ashamed of how I grew up or anything like that. It was just really not the right times, It's not until somebody asks me about me, share about me is when I'm like, sure. And then I just let them know, and then they're like, oh my gosh, like, really? Like you? You used to dumpster dive? I'm like, that's how we used to get our stuff. What do you mean?
Yeah, when we were talking prior to the podcast, I was trying to keep my jaw from just dropping to the table when you're talking about dumpster diving, and then I love it when people leave the clothes outside of the dumpster.
It's very much appreciated.
Yeah.
It's very much. If you don't want something, and it's still good or good enough for some, just leave it. And I'm just giving advice to everybody, right?
In case they need to go dumpster
you don't
diving.
know how much I appreciated that, to where I didn't have to get into and my mom didn't have to give me a boost inside the big old dumpster at times, because the stuff was on the side, of the trash can. And we were like, this is good enough. And then we would leave, and I would be like, oh, this is cool. Now I'm grossed. Every time I think of it, I'm I'm so grossed out. I'm how was I in there just digging? My mom would be like, what else do you see? And I'm I don't know. Let me move. Oh my gosh, my hands were all in there.
Let me out. You're just
I don't know how my hands didn't fall out.
You've had a lot of exceptional experiences, I think, for any child growing up, but I'd say probably having to dive in a dumpster and dig in there, that's horrifying. That's especially horrifying. And so you in the 5th grade, you saw the stand. You saw a chance to provide for your family, and you had a goal. And when you were a staff sergeant, you were able to achieve this goal. You were able to provide this home for your family. What drove you to stay? So once you provided this house for your family, once you knew that they were taken care of, what drove you to stay in the Army and continue to be an NCO?
Because the Army took care of me. In my mind, I was I was able to provide. Because mind you, I didn't buy the house right away for my family. I wasn't able to. But it was enough for me to keep them from moving back to Mexico.
Okay.
It was enough for me to keep them. And then later on, I was able to buy the house for them, right?
Wow.
So it was, so the Army took care of me. So I was I want to take care of the Army and everybody that's in the Army. I've been to duty stations where, and I don't want to say anything in particular, to where it was just the opportunity was right there to become an officer, right there to become a warrant. They were look, I've got a letter of recommendation for you. Do you know who I am? You clearly don't know who I am. And I'm what? So yes, you're so-and-so. And they were yeah, but this letter right here is all you need. You can be. And I was and I would look at it, and they were don't you want to make more money? Aren't you tired of grinding and just...
It's Darth Vader looking at Luke. Why? Luke Skywalker, I'm join me, Luke. They say go into the dark side. And so, yeah, you've been offered opportunities to become a warrant officer and to be an officer, and you just straight said no. You said no.
I just didn't. I just declined. Because I wanted to continue to help soldiers. I wanted to continue to lead. I wanted to stay in the NCO ranks. And in my mind, I was well, they see me as a great NCO, and they want me to cross over. Just I've seen a lot of great NCOs cross over. They were there. I was wow, what a great battle buddy, And then they walk out of there as an officer. And then I was the Army just lost another great officer, to the, and to, I guess, do bigger, better things, right?
Certainly, yeah.
Not better necessarily. Let me scratch that. But I'm just saying that the Army just, and I was so who is going to, who's going to be left, to be able to continue to groom our future, So I wanted to make sure that I was part of that.
Yeah. And
so I stayed as an NCO.
Then that when we talk about the Army as a people-driven organization, who mentors and develops and molds those people more than an NCO? It's in the creed, it's in, in the way that we do everything, that really NCOs leading soldiers and really developing, we talk about NCOs developing soldiers, but, NCOs develop officers too. You get these bright-eyed young lieutenants who have all sorts of awesome ideas and zero experience, and they want to do this. I know when I was a platoon leader, my platoon sergeant kept me, anytime I had this great idea that I wanted to do, rather than be no, sir, that's dumb, he would kind of help me walk the dog a little bit, and I'd be yep, you know what, that might be dumb. And so I think when we, the role of the NCO, developing subordinates, but also developing, senior leaders too. And I think certainly, at junior officers, field grade officers, and general, we all contribute and do our part. But I think really not enough can be said about the importance of the when they call it the backbone of the Army. And so you're dedicated to being the backbone.
Yes.
So when you look at your career, was there any one single mentor that kind of helped you stay on this path, or?
I've had many NCOs that I looked up to, many NCOs. I can't just single out one mentor. I've learned so much from so many individuals, and because of that, because we all, at the end of the day, we develop our own leadership styles.
Yeah.
So because of that, I welcome that, like whoever, because don't get me wrong, I do have mentees like in my ACT, right? But I also encourage them to look outside of that scope and learn from the great NCOs, from there's a lot of great leaders out there that pass on so much great information, and I want them to learn from them. I don't just say, okay, you're my protege, don't look to the left or to the right, you're going to be what I am, and so on. I mean, I welcome them to just look outside of that and then in return do that. And that way they know that as NCOs, we're leaders of soldiers, and I'm saying soldiers, I'm talking about enlisted and officers alike, So I just want them to understand that it doesn't matter if it's somebody that we know, it could be somebody that we don't know, that we're grooming or giving advice to, because that's just what we're here for.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic too, because we don't want our subordinates or peer leaders to become cookie cutter versions of us.
Right.
Getting that variety helps you develop your own style, and I think you were talking about before where like you have to look at the good and you have to look at the bad, because there's things to be learned from both sides of that as far as like developing your style and figuring out what works for you. So what do you feel like is in the future? The Sergeant Major of the Army, or
been in for 26 years, so wherever the Army has for me, I'm ready for it. I'm not tired of that, every time. And I mean, yes, I'm old, right? I'm over 40, right? Getting out of bed becomes a little more difficult.
Nothing but a number.
Right? It's the aches and pains from what we put our bodies through, right?
Yeah.
And we all know we all go through that.
Yeah, I think the Army too has a with PT and the load we put on our bodies, it has a way of sometimes like you feel like you're being prematurely aged a little bit.
Yes, but it's just I think the key thing is just, if you're still having fun, if you're still having a good time, as in like you're still enjoying what you're doing, then stick with it. And I still enjoy what I'm doing. As busy as I am,
Right.
I enjoy what I'm doing. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then it's time to look elsewhere. It's not that you're a bad soldier or a bad leader or what. It's just time to look elsewhere, because if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, then I'm just spreading that kind of vibe to everybody else, and that's not good. Because the Army needs motivation, especially right now that we don't have as much personnel joining as it used to be.
Definitely, we're definitely
or staying in.
Yeah, we're definitely focused on quality over quantity. And I agree. I think we talk about motivating, inspiring, developing, having that passion. I think when the fire burns brightly inside of you, everyone can kind of see it. Everyone around you feels it. And so this is my fourth time doing the podcast now, and I think that ends up being a common theme where they're like, I will stop doing this when I stop having fun. Like when this stops being enjoyable to me, when I stop getting up in the morning and feeling motivated to do this, that's when I'll stop being in the Army. I think those are the kind of leaders that help, drive this organization into the future as we, look at what we're supposed to look like in future peacetime, future conflicts. And I think it takes that passionate, inspired leader especially passionate, inspired NCOs, to mold and develop those soldiers for the future Army. As we're concluding our conversation here, is there anything? What is the one point that you'd want our listeners to take away from this conversation? So, I mean, there's a lot. You came from, I want to say nothing, but it sounds like to barely having anything to, you're going back and forth between the U.S.-Mexico border just to make ends meet. In the 5th grade, you were inspired. You saw that you could be all you could be. You met your personal goal, and then you stayed on to develop and mentor soldiers for the future. And so when you think about what is the one thing that anyone listening to this conversation you want them to take away?
Well, this is first. I appreciate you doing this podcast.
Thank you for being
taking
on.
the time.
No, thank you for being on. Yeah.
and for whoever's listening, right? Whoever actually stayed in the whole time to listen and not change the channel, no? But
Good plug.
But really, like, this is just my story. I'm just one person out of like all the individuals in the service and the Army out in this world. We all have a unique story. So I don't feel like my story is just so special, and it's so, everybody has a special story. Everybody has a unique story and made them who they are. And, so for everybody that I meet out there, it's just, I always look at them and I'm like, I wonder what their story is.
Yeah, right? That is, I think.
And I always want to see where they're going next.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got potential to do more.
Yeah, I agree. I think the people in this organization keep coming back because we all have our own stories, and I think sharing them and listening to them is one of the best things about being in the Army. Well, Sergeant Major Aceves, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you for sharing your story. I know you said it was one of the few times that you shared it, but thank you, because it is just absolutely jaw-dropping, heart-wrenching, and inspiring to hear where you came from. Like you set a goal, and now you're out there inspiring and developing other leaders. This is Captain Debraj Mukherjee for the 19th ESC Every Soldier Counts podcast. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or if you want to see my beautiful mug, you can see us on the 19th ESC YouTube page. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.